Friends, welcome back. This is the 11th video in the tutorial series. Thank you again for all your support, likes, as well as the comments you have passed along. If you recall, what you have learned in the last tutorial is saving a book, saving the book record in a database. So you learned about creating entity, defining attributes, and then you have also learned how you can get the reference of the app delegate, then the persistent container to a context, defining the entity in the code, and then saving the record, right? So let's go ahead and open our book tracker tutorial code, and let's start from where we left. So if you recall, in our last piece of code after saving, right, so we are calling the saving, I added this code to clean up the fields and then making sure that book text field becomes the first responder. What I want to do is I want to call the reset button function instead of doing this. And I did that in the last one, but I then, I canceled it because there's a concept I need to teach you on that. So I thought maybe I can quickly show you the easier way to do it. So let me go ahead and delete this. To call the reset button, the only thing not available in reset is making the book text field as the first responder, right? So that once the cleaning is done, so we are on the first field, ready to accept the next book name. Okay, so how do you call it? So when you see here, the calling is very simple. It's like calling any other function, but it needs a UI bar button. We do not have an outlet for the bar button. So you know how to create the outlet. Go to the main storyboard and split the screen. Go to the file and you can drag our outlet into this. Okay, while I'm doing this, let me also tell you what weak and strong. A weak is a ideal way to do things. It uses less memory and your program is much more faster. So whenever you can, try to use weak outlets. Strong has other regions. We'll talk about it maybe in a later class when you go in details about it. Okay, so go ahead and name it. Maybe it's a save button instead of type UI bar button. Or you can take any one. Let me not take the save one to confuse. You can take any one. I need a reference to the button. Let's take the reset one. So reset button, which is a UI bar button. And when you call the function here, simply pass the reset button. Right. So when you pass the reset button, it will go ahead and I think I've given both the function name the same. Let's not do that. It'll confuse it. So let me delete it here. If you delete from here, you need to delete from here as well, right? Remember that it has link. I have told you this before as well. So go ahead and drag it here. We'll say reset but, right? So I'll give a little different name, not the ideal way to name it, but for now I'll do it like this. And then I exit out and I go here and give the new name reset button. Okay, so once you call it, you do the same function that you do, right? I also let's quickly test this, right, before we go ahead and learn about the next function. Okay, let it come back up. Okay, now you know where to go. Add book. Let's give a new name. Let's say Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. It's a work of non-fiction, and this one I'm currently reading. Okay, so I will save this. So it should call the reset button function, do the same thing but through the reset button. So see here, it will cleans everything, goes up there. Great. Now we have so far saved 2 or 3 different books, right? So I want to make sure you're able to display that book going to the display books button, right? So when you click here, it's an empty screen. So what we'll do for now, we'll create a simple table and it will display all the book names there. Works for you? Let's go ahead and do that. How do you get it done. So you know how to put a table on a view. So you go to the main storyboard. This is your display books, right? So right here, what you do is add a table. So table view, bring it down here. You know the drill. You take the table view and make it a little bigger, little wider. Leave some space on the top for now. Little more wider on the sides. Bring it down till here. And maybe a little more space. And then once it is done, you know how to add the constraint. For a table view, there are a few more things you need to do. Go to the table view, properties, and then add a prototype cell. This is where the value will be shown. And for this cell, give it a name. I'll give it a name as cell, or maybe book cell. How about that? Okay, so that's how we have done it. Once you have done this and you have added all the constraint, we have to add the delegates in the file, so you know how to do it. You will go ahead to the file. Which file? Wow, that's where we need to, this is a new file now we need to create. So I will go ahead and create a new view controller. So new file, you can say file, new, say file again, and take a Cocoa Touch class. You say next, you can see that, make sure the subclass is a UI view controller. Give this as display book view controller. Okay, and once you click next, it'll ask you where to save. You'll see that display book view control is here. You know the drill. You need to go back to your my main storyboard, and you have to make sure this view controller knows that my view controller is the display book view controller. So once you link it, this file is now for this one. So go back to this file, and if you recall from your last class, I think 2, 3 or maybe 4 tutorials back, you need to add the UI table view delegate and the UI table view data source. Once you do that, it will show you an error for you. It will pop up because there are 2 protocols you need to define for the data source. And if you simply say fix it, will put it over here. I will bring it down to the end of the line of code, delete all of those comments line which we don't need, and be ready with your function, right? So now what we need to do is, I need a reference of the table view here. So how do you do that? You go for the split screen, take this one, take main storyboard. Oops, sorry about that. Take main storyboard, and if you make it a little smaller, right here, right? So press the control, bring the table view here, make it a V control, and name it, this is for book display, that's a book table view. Excellent. So you have the book table view. You know that you need to set the delegates, which you have done before. So you say right in the view did load, say book delegate dot book table view dot delegate equal to self, and you have to also say that this book table view is also responsible for all of the data source, which is the book names coming from the, this time coming from the repository. Once you have done that, just to satisfy this code, right now I'll say return 1, which doesn't mean anything for now. We'll return 1 because it will not always conform to the protocol. In the table view, this is where your cell 4 row at, it will show what you want to do for the cell. If you recall, I will create a let cell equals to table view, which is this table view, which is positive, which is nothing but the book table view dot dq reusable cell. If you recall this, with identifier, you know the name, you give the name, right, book cell, and index path, which you get from, which will give it the row and the column from where the value is coming. Once you have the cell, we have to do a few things with the cell, but for now we'll say return cell, because it needs a cells to be returned back, which is what I'm doing. So one cell will return back 1. We have done this before. So right now the code is functional. There will be no error into this, right? But what we need to do is, as you load this view, you need to load all the books from your repository. Remember the repository, which is the entity book. All right now we have stored, I think, 3 books. They're all stored here. How do I get it? So to get that, let's go back to our display book view controller, and right here in view did load, I'll say load records. I'll define a function with the name function load records. This is our own function, and I will call this load records right from here. So what do you do there? Similar way, you have to get the reference to the app delegate. You know how to do it now. Say I need the app delegate. This is a variable, you can give it any name, but you get it from the UI application dot shared dot delegate, and this is of type app delegate, right? Then you need to get the context. So you say last time we get the name my context, let's do the same thing this time as well, my context. And top warning is coming because we never use the app delegate. Now once I use it, it'll go away. App delegate dot persistent container dot view context, right? You get the context now. Last time when you are saving a record, you actually created an entity type and you saved everything there, but this time you want to fetch record. So similar to that, you have a function known as fetch request. So I will define a variable, let's say fetch request with a small f, and I'll say that, remember from where you want to fetch records, from the entity. You know the entity name book, right? So you can see this book, which is a class, is an entity available to you, which is what you created. If you recall, you can go back here. That's the name I'm talking about, right? So go back again to the code and say book dot, you will say fetch request. Okay, and when you fetch it, you will say that this, whenever you fetch it, is of particular type, on which is what you have to say that it's of NS is your system defined fetch request, FETCH NS fetch. Just wonder, I know why it is not coming up. You know what, let me delete this for now. You remember that import code data, you need to do that, right, for any of the data functions, right? So I did import code data. Now you will get everything what I'm talking about. So you'll say fetch request equals to, from your book, which is the entity, you will say fetch request. Now you get it. This is of type as you're going to get as NS fetch request, and you have to use your brackets. This is syntax, that's the way to write what is of type book. So it will get you all the book type, it will request, it will get you in the fetch request. Recall that both of these give you warning because you have not used both of them now. You will use it now by doing do. You remember do, where you want to execute certain things. So do, this time you'll say I want to get all the books. Where do you want to get all the books? You want to get the books, but you have to store it somewhere, right? So we'll define a variable here, which will name it as, let's say variable, let's say get me all the books in books, and this is of type books. This is array of books, right? So this book is the entity, and you're going to defining a variable where you want it, and this is of type books. Okay, so you have learned about variables before. I'm sorry, the colon is missing. Okay, so this is your name, all the books of entity type book, which is an array, and right now you don't know the value, so it is in braces like this. Now you will do the do function. It's a do. When you do, you remember the try, please try getting all the books in my variable books, which is equal to, and how do you get it? Context, which is a my context, which is here. Context is how I told you last time, it connects back to the database dot, just like you have saved it as a fetch as well, a function known as fetch, FETCH. And when you say fetch, it needs certain things. The first thing that it needs is, what is the request? You have defined what kind of fetch you're going to do in this variable, right? So you'll say fetch, and I have defined what I need from the fetch. This is this fetch request, and every try has to have a catch, and if there's an error in fetching, it will print that error. If not, all your book names are in your books. Okay, so if they're in the books, you know that you know that this books can be used in a table view. But here is a problem now. If and I intentionally did that so I can explain to you. This books is defined within this function. See the scope. So if I want to use this books in a table view, I cannot, because it will not see this book. So what you need to do is you take this book away from here and put it at a class level so that all the methods can see it. So I put it here. Now this function can see it, so as this one, right? So I can, instead of return, I will say return books dot, there is a function known as count. So total count, if there are 3 books, it will say 3. There are 4, it will say 4. You have done this before, right? From an array standpoint. In the cell, I will say cell dot text label dot text is equal to books, and you know index path dot row. I've taught this before. You get the current row value. So for the first time it will be 0, it will get 0, then 1, then 2, accordingly. Okay, so it's saying dot, you need the book name, right? Because books has book name, author name also. I said dot get the book name and assign it to the cell. There are 3 books, it should show all the 3 books. Let's go ahead and run this program and see if it is working fine. So as soon as we run it, there you go. I think we created few books many times. We are not checking whether a book exists or not. So if you create it twice, it will create it twice. All of those books names are here. Cool. So now let's try to test it out. Let's go to the add books and let's try to add a book. I'm going to show you something and I'm going to leave you with that particular issue so they can solve it later. So let me add a book. Let's say the book name is, I don't know, give a book name, like let's say for example 3 Musketeers. Okay, and this is by Alexander. I think it's Alexander Dumas, if I'm not wrong. It's a work of fiction, and I say to be read. Okay, and if I save it, it's right now coming to the screen. But if I go to display book, it should show the book 3 Musketeers in the list, right? Let's see where it's not showing. Why is that? But let's try to stop the program and run it again and see if this time the book name comes. Well, it comes. So when I'm moving between the screen, it's not showing, but when I stop and bring it back, it shows again. Why don't you try to debug that? Try to find out why it is happening that way. I'll leave you with that problem. In the next class, I'll show you about this. Just to give you a hint, it's all about reloading the table, which you have done before, and also about when to call that function. Also the event, you have to understand when you're moving here, which event gets called. Okay, so with that, I'll leave you here. I think you have achieved quite a lot. You have saved a record, you're able to retrieve it, and you're able to display it back as well. Thank you again for listening. Hope you like it. Bye.